What's up, fellas? My name is Tucker. Today's video is going to be about the San Antonio Spurs offseason. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials right there. Let's go and get started. Okay, so San Antonio came into this offseason with a lot of questions and a lot of salary cap space, but they certainly had some decisions to make, not the least of which was, what are they going to do with DeMar DeRozan? Are they going to look to go towards a little bit more of a rebuild? Are they just going to continually try and push themselves towards the middle of the NBA, which has kind of been the status quo for them for a couple of years? What were they going to do with DeJounte Murray and Derek White? There was some trade rumors swirling around both of those guys. And then what were they going to do as a whole with their salary cap space? And I expressed frustration and have been expressing frustration with the overall team building strategy of the San Antonio Spurs for like a year and a half at this point, where they just continually felt like a team that was behind the times when it came to how to build a team. They had a lot of people on their staff leave over the years to go pursue other jobs. They just didn't quite seem the same. And the fact that they didn't know how much longer Popovich was going to coach, the fact that it didn't seem like he wanted to coach a rebuilding team, which made total sense, all those things created a very complicated and ultimately an unsuccessful situation for San Antonio over the last couple of years. But thankfully, this offseason, I think we've started to see them lean more into a modern NBA team building strategy, and one that is going to be more focused on youth moving forward. And I struggle to call it a rebuild because it is the Spurs, but a bit of a retooling of this roster in a very positive way. Let's look at what they did this offseason briefly. First up, they drafted Josh Primo in the first round of the draft. Most people did not have him even remotely close to where they had drafted him. They did not see him as a lottery level player. A lot of people had him in the 20s. I'm not going to sit here and act like I've watched a lot of Josh Primo film and have any kind of analysis on the guy. That's just what everybody else has said. But importantly, with the rest of this roster, he was the youngest player in the entirety of the class. So at least it shows a willingness to invest in players that have high potential, that have high upside, rather than drafting like a 24-year-old rookie. So I'll take that as a relative positive when it comes to kind of this youth movement that we're going to discuss throughout the video. Next up, in free agency, couple of significant deals here. Doug McDermott, 3 years, $42 million. Really, really good shooter, someone that Indiana's had to rely on increasingly over the last couple of years. This guy continues to get contracts because he's big, he can shoot, and he at least halfway competes defensively. Still just 29 years old as well. We'll get to the ages here in a second. The next one that I actually do sneaky like is Zach Collins, 3 years, $22 million, which seems like a lot for a guy that's done basically nothing in the NBA but get hurt and show a little bit of promise and potential through his first couple of years in Portland. But I like the deal because it shows a willingness of San Antonio, again, to go towards a youth movement, to spend money on younger players, and it shows that they're willing to take a flyer on players that still could have potential, which shows that maybe they're not overly concerned with making the postseason this year. They also signed Australian big man Jock Landale, who is just 25 years old. They bring back Bryn Forbes, who is 28. And the biggest move of the offseason, they sign and trade away DeMar DeRozan. The further we got into the offseason, I was increasingly concerned that DeMar DeRozan might be returning to San Antonio, which I did not think was the proper move for them at all. And thankfully, not only did he not come back, but they were able to get value out of him with a future first from Chicago and a couple of second-round picks and some expirings as well. I think that shows a willingness of San Antonio to accept the situation that they're in and start pushing towards a bit of a more long-term view of team building. He also became a part of the crazy, huge Spencer Dinwiddie trade. It was expanded to include Russell Westbrook. Essentially, they became an outlet for other teams to take on the salary of Chandler Hutchison, who is just 25 years old, and a second-round pick to do literally nothing but just take on those contracts in the Dinwiddie trade. Again, showing a willingness to get some future assets here, not really focus on the present. Here's the most critical and the most important part of this entire video, though. San Antonio for years has re-signed guys like Rudy Gay, re-signed guys like Patty Mills, brought in DeMar DeRozan, brought in LaMarcus Aldridge, kept those guys probably a year too late, and they have always tried to push towards the middle. By my count, as of today, the Spurs do not have a single player on their roster that is 30 years old. The oldest players on the entirety of the Spurs roster, by my count, are Doug McDermott, who's 29, Bryn Forbes, who's 28, and Derek White, who's 27. Here's the roster for the Spurs going into next season. They have 1,000 guards. That's the one thing about the Primo pick. Even if you like him as a player, you like the potential, you like the upside, they've got a ton of guards already. DeJounte Murray, Trey Jones, Derek White, Keldon Johnson, Lonnie Walker, Josh Primo, and then Bryn Forbes as well. Ton of guards. On the wings, McDermott, Vassell, the rookie from last year, and Hutchinson. And then as the big guys, Jakob Poeltl, Zach Collins, and Jock Landale as well. So as you look at the roster, is it going to be a fantastic team next year? Has San Antonio put themselves in a position to be a guaranteed playoff team next year? No. Can they be a playoff team? Sure. The West is going to be tough, but it's the Spurs. They're always going to have a tendency to overperform. They've got some talented guys in DeJounte Murray and Derek White. Keldon Johnson could have a really good year after his experience with Team USA. And they've brought in shooting. I mean, they're going to be able to shoot the ball well. And I kind of sneaky like their big man rotation as well. Pirtle's a really good defensive big. Collins with some upside there. And Landale's looked incredible in the Olympics to this point. So I kind of sneaky like the roster even for next season. I'm not saying they're a guaranteed playoff team, but they might push for that play-in spot. But ultimately, what gives me hope is that they let Rudy Gay go. They let Patty Mills go. They let DeMar DeRozan go. And they don't have older players. They have veterans. They have guys that are going to be good basketball players. This isn't an Oklahoma City Thunder style complete teardown and rebuild. But when you look at their payroll, when you look at their draft assets, when you look at the youth of the roster, you know what it looks like? It looks like a modern NBA team. It looks like a modern NBA, if you want to call it that, rebuild. But at the end of the day, it is flexible. They have future draft assets. They have young players. They have players with potential. And they're not locked into anything. Even the free agents that they brought in, they still have cap space for this offseason, by the way. But even the free agents they brought in, Doug McDermott, 3 years, 42. Zach Collins, 3 years, 22. They have the ability to very easily get out of these contracts if they need to, and they're not prohibitively expensive. Neither are, by the way, DeJounte Murray or Derek White, the other two big contracts on the roster. So San Antonio is in a spot now. We're in the middle of the year. If things aren't going great, they can trade some of these guys. They can take on contracts from other teams in exchange for draft assets. And what this is all pointing to for me, and maybe I'm being overly optimistic. Maybe they're going to spend this cap space still on a couple of other guys and really try and push towards the playoffs. But what this points towards to me is that San Antonio's accepted, hey, we need to take a year and have a youth movement here. We can still have salary cap space next offseason. We can still do this, that, and the other thing. But we need a year. When we win between 30 and 35 games, we push for a high draft pick, maybe have the opportunity to trade away some of these guys and really retool this roster to acquire top-end, high-level talent. They've done a decent job of developing guys like DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Keldon Johnson, who were not high draft picks. And so if they can get their hands on one of the absolute game-changing players coming into the league for next season, things could start to really look up for this franchise. So what I'm hoping, granted, optimism is not something that I'm normally great with basketball, but maybe I'm being overly optimistic here. But still, what I'm hoping is happening is San Antonio has come to an agreement with Greg Popovich where he's going to be the coach for the next couple of seasons. And he's comfortable with one youth movement. Let's give it everything we have to develop these young guys a year. And then everything rides on next year in terms of trying to be one of the better teams in the Western Conference once again, whether that be via trades, whether that be via a big-time rookie that they get in the draft. I think it's very clear that in comparison to past rosters for San Antonio going into the season, they don't necessarily have the intention of trying to win 45 games this year. There aren't any crazy old veterans. There aren't any guys that have been signed and overpaid, just to show up and guard and shoot. Guys like DeMar Carroll is what I'm thinking about. Everybody in the roster is movable. Everybody in the roster has value, and nobody on the roster is prohibitive to any kind of plan that San Antonio would have from a team building perspective moving forward. And as I said, that's fantastic because you know what that looks like? The other 29 teams in the league, or at least what the other 29 teams are trying to move towards. 29's a bit of an overestimate. There's contenders that have awful payrolls that are old and don't have flexibility. You understand what I'm saying? The other teams in the league that haven't made the playoffs in a couple of seasons, this is what their payroll looks like. This is what their draft assets look like. If they have the opportunity to make a move, they have extra picks and second round picks and things like that they can use to kind of grease the wheels on those trades. They have young players they can develop. Maybe Josh Primo's the steal of the draft and he just needs 3 years to get there. They've got 3 years. They've got 1,000 guards to play in front of the guy, and now it seems like they are willing to go towards a rebuild. So I'm ecstatic. I've done a complete 180 on San Antonio. I never thought that they would actually make moves like this where they let DeRozan go and they're considering moving some of the other guys on the roster, and they have flexibility and they have all this movement. Granted, I should give them the benefit of the doubt. It's the San Antonio Spurs. They are the longest run of success in modern NBA history for 20 years, where they were just a really, really good team for 20 years. But the moves that they had made for the last couple of seasons gave me very little confidence that they would ever do exactly what they've done this offseason. Now, granted, is it a complete teardown rebuild, which maybe you could argue they should have gone towards? No, but I think this is about as good as we're going to get from San Antonio, and I can't wait to see not only what happens with these young guys this year. They have plenty of intriguing players, but also the direction of the team moving forward, what they're thinking they would like to do, and how successful this youth movement development program thing they're trying to put together is going to be. But I'm excited to see it. Good things for San Antonio. Well done. I'm very excited. But that is going to be the end of the video today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials as well at the top of the screen. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see y'all next time, fellas. Peace.